Welcome back to our True Crime channel. Over the last week, we've been inundated with information about the Jeffrey Epstein case after the DOJ said, "There's nothing to see here. Epstein's gone," and some might say case closed. But justice feels incomplete. Despite payouts to a few victims, court testimonies suggest he ran a broader operation. If true, those involved face no consequences, and they may still be committing similar acts elsewhere. Join us as we sift through the noise, unpack what we have found relevant, and why we just can't believe the DOJ's memo. Like, subscribe, and let's dive in. Everything in this video today is alleged. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Phone data tracked to the island. And the way that we're all being tracked all the time, it doesn't seem plausible that they can't gather more information outside of what is in the files now. If some files are missing, okay, start the investigation over. This just feels too big to let go, especially because of the victims. Epstein taken off of watch.
Hey everybody, Dr. G here. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist as well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing more evidence from the Epstein cover-up. I wanted to talk about the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Justice's report on Epstein's death. What we're going to be looking at is the date, July 29th. I want to briefly give you a little bit of context before I talk about the date, July 29th. August 10th is when he was found dead. July 23rd, he was found with orange cloth around his neck. It was alleged by him that somebody else did it to him. It was suggested by other people that he did it himself. That was ultimately never determined, even according to this report. They were never clear on what happened. So you'll hear people say he attempted on July 23rd. There's not evidence that that's actually true. But according to this report's timeline, here's what happened on July 29th. Psychology department staff determined that Epstein can be released from psychological observation and transferred back to the SHU, Special Housing Unit. That's what SHU stands for. All right, so keep in mind, on July 29th, he was released from observation. Let's see what else happened on July 29th. Now, before I read this quote, I want you to keep in mind there were two DVR systems that all of the security cameras were attached to. It was like 150 security cameras, DVR1 and DVR2. They were recorded at one or the other. All of the cameras on Epstein's block, all the ones around his cell, were on DVR2. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. Now, this is a quote talking about the electronics technician that came the same day that his body was found. Later that day, he was asked to pull potential video from cameras located in and around the SHU. The electronics technician eventually determined that most of the cameras in the SHU area were assigned to record to DVR2. While the cameras assigned to DVR2 were providing live video streams on August 9th and 10th, 2019, what that means is that on the cameras, like if you were looking at security cameras, there would have been a feed, but it would have not been recording to anything. It wouldn't save anywhere. No recordings from those cameras were available due to the DVR2 hard drive issue, which the FBI later determined had occurred on July 29th, 2019. So what are the odds? Jeffrey Epstein is going to be released back into the SHU, and all of a sudden, the cameras no longer work. And they continue to not record until after Jeffrey Epstein's death. He died on the 10th, so keep that in mind. Now, something else I want you to think about, just in terms of the technology of this, is that when DVR systems are not functional, because I researched this, it will say, no hard drive, no disk, data corrupt, system failure. It will tell you on the screen that it is not working. Also, there can be physical things like lights that come on. There are a million ways to tell that it is not recording, that it is not properly working. So the idea that this went unknown for a couple of weeks, it's pretty wild. Now, there is a ton of information in this report, and there's all sorts of really strange inconsistencies. Like at one point in the opening summary, it says that the correctional officers never got up from their seats the whole time, and they were up and about. We can watch it with our own eyes, and it even talks about it in this report. So the report's all over the place.
Epstein cell footage.
Where's the videotape of an Epstein Island of X, Y, and Z committing these frauds? Why haven't you given it to us? Do you really think I wouldn't give that to you if it existed? I'm working my ass off, along with the leadership at the Bureau and DOJ, to get you what we're allowed to give you. And you're going to get the video of the cell, and you're going to see for yourself.
It is funny that he describes it as video of the cell, because what they released was not video of Jeffrey Epstein's cell, but of the common area. Here is the camera. The video shows cell 46, but Jeffrey Epstein was in cell 220. I'm going to show you cell diagrams, and these are from the official DOJ report on Jeffrey Epstein's death. Jeffrey Epstein's cell was here. The camera was located here with a massive blind spot that does not cover Epstein's cell. Even this diagram is exaggerated because it shows that the camera covers the stairs leading to Epstein's cell. But you can clearly see from the video that you can only barely see the stairs. Someone absolutely could go up the stairs to Epstein's cell without ever being on camera. This video does not prove anything. What is even more disturbing is there is a minute missing from the video footage. The video cuts out from 11:58 to midnight. Why would the DOJ release video where 1 minute is mysteriously missing? At approximately 7 p.m., contrary to BOP policy but with the permission of a unit manager, Epstein is permitted to place an unmonitored telephone call to a number with a New York City area code, purportedly to speak with his mother. In actuality, Epstein speaks with someone with whom he allegedly has a personal relationship. After the call, Epstein is returned to his cell where he remains without a cellmate. Why does the initial report say that Jeffrey Epstein was brought to his cell after a 7 p.m. phone call, but this new memo says that Jeffrey Epstein was locked in his cell at 10:40 p.m.? That is a pretty major discrepancy that happened right before he died. What is even more strange, if we look at the video, something strange happens around 10:40 p.m. At 10:38 and 50 seconds, one of the guards gets up from their desk and walks over into the blind spot. Then shortly after, at 10:39 and 45 seconds, if you look closely, you can see a few pixels of an orange jumpsuit of someone walking up the stairs towards Jeffrey Epstein's cell. Can you see it? Now, just to be clear, prisoners are usually locked in their cell at night. They don't just let prisoners walk around the cell block at 10:40 p.m. So who was that person walking up the stairs to Jeffrey Epstein's cell? I'm not making it up that someone went up the stairs, because the initial report also mentioned that they could see this in the video. Do you understand what is happening here? We have video of some orange jumpsuit moving up the stairs towards Jeffrey Epstein's cell at 10:40 p.m. The DOJ tries to explain this by saying that a corrections officer was walking up the stairs carrying inmate clothing. Why? Where were they taking it at 10:40 p.m.? Where did they put it? This is such a bizarre thing. Wouldn't someone remember why they did that? We can see in the video that the color is the full length of a person. So why were they carrying it unfolded so the camera could capture the full length of the clothing? And why were all the other cameras turned off? This whole explanation does not make any sense. Or does it make more sense that this was another prisoner going to murder Jeffrey Epstein? I think this video footage raises more questions than it answers.
Edited prison video.
Jake, you have analyzed the video. There's the missing minute. What do you make of it?
Really no clue. That's honestly, I've reviewed hundreds of surveillance systems during my career. I've never seen one that skips an entire, what looks to be a minute and 1 second, just out of nowhere. However, when we look at the metadata of these videos, we see that these clearly are not the originals.
What makes you realize that these aren't the originals?
So within the EXIF metadata that we're looking at, we have two different kinds. We have XMP metadata, which is an Adobe product. Adobe created it, helps keep track of our projects that we work on in Premiere and video editing. There's a few different pieces. Probably the biggest one we can see is we see multiple saves creations, again, multiple saves, a modification, and then 2 more saves. So we have somebody that is actively splicing together videos. And then we also see that we're ingesting at least 4 different MP4 videos into this one that the government then calls video1.mp4. So we can see even down to the computer username that the government had working on this, the MJ Cole, we see a short name for what Windows would call that user. So we have so many different pieces. And then we even have the creation date that this final MP4 video that's produced was created on May 23rd of this year.
Maybe everyone doesn't remember. There have been so many reports on this case for the last 6 years. They're online. Questions about Epstein's autopsy?
An autopsy was done today on the body of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still no conclusion. New York's medical examiner says she needs more information before she's sure about the cause of death.
Just 2 weeks ago, Epstein was found semi-conscious on the floor of his jail cell there. Sources tell CBS News that following his apparent suicide attempt, Epstein told authorities he feared powerful people might be trying to prevent him from cooperating with authorities. The New York Times reported Sunday Epstein had been taken off suicide watch and was supposed to have been checked by guards every 30 minutes, but that procedure was not being followed the night before he was found. Sources at the jail tell CBS News they often rely on certain inmates to assist guards in monitoring other inmates due to a lack of manpower.
There are mysteries surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death, and even after reviewing all the autopsy photos, reading the autopsy, and looking at the photos from inside the cell, we still have questions. We spoke to multiple pathologists for this story, and they all pretty much agree on one thing, that without knowing the position of the body, the way that Jeffrey Epstein's body was found, it's almost impossible to determine the cause of death with any certainty. Knowing the position that a body was found in is a key piece of evidence in any death investigation. And in this case, we don't know how Jeffrey Epstein's body was found.
We still don't have that information. So if this was called suicide without all that information, it was a premature judgment.
The autopsy reveals that Jeffrey Epstein had petechiae. That's a key indicator that somebody's neck was compressed and that you see it more in a compression than you do see it in a hanging. We know from the autopsy that Jeffrey Epstein had a number of other injuries. There was an injury to the back of his neck and had an injection mark very clearly in his arm. We don't know what that's from. We've not been able to get the medical records from inside the MCC. Dr. Bodden's key reasons for being suspicious about the death of Jeffrey Epstein is the broken hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage.
In Jeffrey Epstein's autopsy, there were fractures of the left, the right thyroid cartilage, and the left hyoid bone, all requiring different kinds of pressure and positioning of the ligature.
Yes, that's very suspicious to have all three of those bones broken, the cartilage broken. The doctor who performed the autopsy, while Dr. Michael Bodden observed, came to the determination that it was inconclusive and they needed more evidence. And then a couple days later, they changed that and determined that the cause of death was suicide by hanging.
This would be the ligature that was involved in causing the death.
The edge is folded here.
One of the things we have heard is that the guard that found Jeffrey Epstein cut him down, which you'd seem to indicate somebody cutting down or something. The medical examiner examined, and you look very closely at the edges. It appears perfectly hemmed. It doesn't look like anybody ever took scissors to it. We have examined many photos, looked at the evidence, and talked to so many people, but we still have many questions.
Why did banks pay Epstein's victims?
Major bank accused of bankrolling convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein now compensating his victims. Deutsche Bank has agreed to pay $75 million to settle claims brought by an Epstein survivor accusing the bank of knowingly facilitating a trafficking operation in order to churn profits, enabling Epstein's abuse for years.
New documents filed in a lawsuit brought against J.P. Morgan by the U.S. Virgin Islands allege that the bank turned a blind eye to evidence of human trafficking over more than a decade because of the size of Epstein's accounts at the bank. The suit also alleges that decisions about Epstein's accounts at the bank were, quote, advocated and approved at the senior levels of J.P. Morgan, including by Jess Staley, a former high-level J.P. Morgan executive who would later go on to become CEO of Barclays and who himself had a close personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The suit also alleges that emails, quote, even suggest that Staley may have been involved in Epstein's trafficking operation. And when J.P. Morgan compliance officials flagged the Epstein accounts, it was allegedly Staley who vouched for Epstein. The suit says Staley sent an email to Epstein, who was incarcerated at the time, presumably from Epstein's private Caribbean island. Staley said this: presently, I'm in the hot tub with a glass of white wine. This is an amazing place. I owe you much, and I deeply appreciate our friendship. I have few so profound. In 2011, JP Morgan employees allegedly reviewed the Epstein accounts in the wake of news stories. They decided to enhance monitoring of the accounts. An internal email said, Jess Staley discussed the topic with Jeffrey Epstein. The suit also alleges that JP Morgan ignored red flags in Epstein's use of his accounts at the bank. In one case, the suit alleges that Epstein paid more than $600,000 to a woman who, according to news reports, Epstein had purchased at the age of 14.
The UK dropped unsealed court files this year. And it doesn't seem like any of the people that flew on his plane or visited his island were ever even questioned about anything that they've seen. Even if the list has innocent people on it, it's a place to start. Start interviewing those people. It seems like there were people that were aware of what was going on and nobody reported it. Why? Or did somebody report it and nobody ever found out? That seems like something you couldn't just ignore. There are just too many inconsistencies.
I know firsthand that they haven't disclosed everything. I can tell you that with 100% certainty that not everything has been disclosed. So is there a quote list of these people? No, it doesn't exist. There's no list, but there's a phone book, and Epstein knew who he knew, and so did Maxwell. So when these high-profile individuals would make the call because they happen to be in town for the winter and say, hey, I need somebody today, then Maxwell would round up the girls and send someone over.
Kuvan says his clients shared names of some of those so-called customers, names that remain hidden because of attorney-client privilege and NDAs signed as part of their settlements.
I'm aware, because of the work that I did on the cases, of numerous high-profile individuals, which I am unfortunately not allowed to disclose, that exist, that were utilizing the services of Epstein and Maxwell to obtain girls while they were on the island.
Kuvan says that is still not being released. Videotapes found in Epstein's homes, taken from multiple surveillance cameras.
There were thousands of hours of videotapes taken from inside the homes of Jeffrey Epstein that I have no doubt, have video of people on them. People that have never been named before, I never identified before. Let's see the tapes.
Kuvan says he doesn't know why the government seems to be protecting the men who had sex with Epstein's teenage victims, but he has a theory.
They're probably very wealthy donors to the party, and as a result, they don't want to shake the apple cart.
Newly released prison video of Epstein's final hours, Kuvan says it proves nothing.
All the video does is show that they're trying real hard to get people to believe one thing and not another.
Here's the Epstein article, by the way, in black and white. Epstein bragging about being a CIA agent. Of course, he later denied it, right? Okay.
My view is that this is a dark fairy story. There is no way a young 14-year-old girl would get into a car with a man like Jeffrey Epstein. But if the person enticing her in talks like Mary Poppins, is nice, pleasant, a woman, then you may well get in the car. And that was Ghislaine's place in what I like to call, I'm afraid to say, the Jeffrey Epstein sort of fresh child factory. It was industrial. The number of girls, the evidence is compelling and damning.
It was reported that you continued to meet with him over several years, and that, in other words, a number of meetings. What did you do when you found out about his background?
I've said I regretted having those dinners.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so, in general, you always have to be careful.
Who was Robert Maxwell? Ghislaine Maxwell's father, the handler of Jeffrey Epstein. Here's my interview with Gordon Thomas.
In 1991, the world media industry was rocked by the sudden and unexplained mysterious death of British media tycoon Robert Maxwell. Mr. Maxwell was one of the wealthiest men in the world. His media empire reached across Great Britain, Europe, into Israel, and the United States of America. He rivaled the biggest names in media, including Rupert Murdoch. But in 1991, Mr. Maxwell came to a sudden demise. And immediately after his death in 1991, there were a number of stories that began to surface that perhaps his death was not accidental or natural. Gordon Thomas, the award-winning, internationally acclaimed author of numerous books on intelligence agencies and espionage, just completed the publication of an absolutely incredible book on the life and death of Robert Maxwell. The book is entitled Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, The Life and Murder of a Media Mogul. Intricate details about the involvement of Robert Maxwell with the Israeli Mossad spy agency.
Serving 20 years for child sex trafficking.
Maxwell admits meeting Jeffrey Epstein was the biggest mistake of her life, but she is convinced his death was not as it seems.
I believe that he was murdered. Well, I was shocked. And I wondered how it had happened. Because as far as I was concerned, I was sure he was going to appeal. And I was sure that he was covered under the non-prosecution agreement. But I wasn't in the indictment. So I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even one of the co-conspirators. I obviously wish I'd never met him. You know, looking back now, I probably wish I had stayed in England.
Jeffrey Epstein was working as an informant for the FBI because it is written in his court documents from 2008. Here's what Dan Bongino used to say before he took his role at the FBI.
I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who. You know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset. His plane and that island, the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source. These assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know. But this person, who's a very, very good reporter, I mean, aces, right? Swore Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset, and they may have had his plane wired up, and they're the ones who have all this stuff.
Tully also told us there were photos of topless girls in buildings around the compound, and says he quit his job after a conversation with one of Epstein's employees from Palm Beach.
He said, "What's with the young girls?" And I said, "Oh, yeah. I'm not real comfortable with the young girls thing, too. Is that in West Palm Beach as well?" He said, "Worse."
Did you consider in that moment perhaps reaching out to law enforcement?
No.
According to government records, Epstein is registered as a sex offender in the Virgin Islands, but unlike in the U.S., where he had level 3 sex offender status, considered the most dangerous, in the Virgin Islands, he is classified as Tier 1, the least dangerous. It meant he had to check in with local authorities just once a year.
Was the late convicted sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein a useful idiot for the Israeli state? Former Israeli spy Ari Ben Menashe, who worked for Robert Maxwell, the late disgraced British tabloid Daily Mirror owner, joins me now via Skype from Montreal in Canada. Said Israeli spy, because Israel denies you are a spy, despite the U.S. jury verdict that you acted for Israel. Tell me about being a spy and talk about geopolitics. You're not fearful, more fearful of assassination.
I live in Canada and I wrote a book. It's all out there and I hope for the best.
Of course, it's a book that came out some years ago. Now, Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell, there are reports she's in Paris. You maintain that it was your employer, Robert Maxwell, owner of the Daily Mirror. You say that he was an Israeli agent and as was his daughter.
He was not my employer. I would like to correct that.
Okay.
We worked together with him.
And you say that his daughter Ghislaine also, though, worked for Israel, and it was Robert Maxwell who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell way before the 1990s, as mainstream media is reporting.
Correct. Mr. Epstein was introduced to Ms. Maxwell probably sometime in the 80s. And Mr. Maxwell also thought he might be introducing a fellow to date his daughter. He tried to do a favor to his daughter, to find her a shidduch, as they say in Hebrew, a match.
Okay, and that didn't really quite work out. I suppose what the most alarming allegations that you've been making are that the entire Epstein operation was a honey trap operation to entrap politicians, policymakers, celebrities, people in the media eye, basically to become Israel's assets.
Correct. That it became basically an intelligence operation to entrap different politicians around the world.
Michael Francis, he was a capo for the Colombo crime family in the 1980s. He served time in the exact cell where Epstein was later held. Tell us about that cell.
Well, listen, I spent 7 months on that tier and in those cells. And the first thing I have to say, there's no way you are able to commit suicide. There's just no way. There's no way to hang yourself. There's nothing from the ceiling and work really hard to try to hang yourself. And I don't think you can accomplish it at that point. As far as the cameras being off, I haven't experienced that. I did 8 years in prison, and I haven't experienced cameras being broken and the perfect storm of correctional officers not walking those cells. They walk in and they look in on you all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's embarrassing to go to the toilet because they're walking past you and looking in the cell constantly. So I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. They have the videos. Alan Dershowitz recently said that he saw the client list, but because there's people that he can't, because he's an attorney, he can't, reveal what he saw. But he said he saw the client list. He's demanding that it be released, because I found out for sure that he had cameras on every bedroom, recording everything. And all of a sudden, all of it is gone. I mean, none of this makes sense. And look, the only reason it's important, it's not that anybody's trying to say, come on, this guy was a creep. And there was young women involved in this, young girls that were trafficked and abused. I have 5 daughters and I have granddaughters, and I just don't like it. And anybody that's involved in this should be held accountable. This is not it. This is a setup to have these clothes in there. It's absolutely ridiculous. Somebody needs to explain what they were doing in there.
Yes.
I'm telling you, Benny, you get one thing to wear. That's it. Nothing else. They don't give you anything else.
So that's obviously very strange. Could you just, final question on this, and here's the outside of the cell and what it looks like on the actual tier block, the L tier block. And can you explain, what do you think happened then exactly, Michael? Do you think that another inmate was allowed into Jeffrey Epstein's cell? We have some questions about a serial striker who was a bodybuilder who was housed with Jeffrey Epstein. Seems like maybe we could just ask this guy a couple questions, but we've never gotten a list of names of who he was with. On the tier block, we've never gotten a list of people that he was bunked with, or that were inside the cell with him. We've gotten, nothing. We don't even know the names of the guards, right? It's crazy.
No, we don't know anything. And listen, they could have let somebody in there.
Here's the guy. Here's the guy, by the way. He just happens to be a serial striker who's being held with Epstein that night.
Yeah, I don't think he'd have too much trouble in taking care of Epstein, but who knows? 2 minutes of the tape are gone. Again, everything is always so shady, Benny. Always. You never get proper answers.
There's just too much information out there that can't be ignored. Although there may not be an actual client list, seems like the FBI could go through those thousands of hours of video and see if there was anybody actually in the video. I know that Bondi said it was just CSAM material that Epstein downloaded, but that material had to come from somewhere as well. We can't forget about the victims and what they've been through. If Epstein was associated with others, we need to protect potential future victims. All of the videos that we pulled information from will be linked down below in the description box if you would like to watch the video in its entirety. So what do you guys think? Do you think Epstein unalived himself? Do you think there's others implicated in his crimes other than Ghislaine? Why won't they let Ghislaine talk to the court? We hope this information was helpful that we found out there. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.